I want to tell you a story about a man called Russell. Russell was a typical guy. He had a partner, a son, a good job as a construction worker. But one day on his way home from work, he collapsed, a brainstem stroke. The stroke caused severe neurological damage, and Russell had to begin again, relearning how to walk, how to talk. He spent months lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, panicking about his future. He developed back pain so bad he couldn't sit up. He lost his job. His relationship fell apart. He couldn't play with his son anymore. He put on weight. He couldn't sleep. His doctor prescribed dozens of pills, but new problems kept accumulating. And Russell felt himself spiraling down into depression. But then his doctor prescribed a new treatment, one so cutting edge it wasn't universally available on the NHS. Russell didn't really feel he had anything to lose anymore. He was desperate, so he'd said he'd take whatever. And the GP wrote the prescription. 8 weeks of art classes. At first, Russell thought this was some kind of joke. He didn't know how art could possibly help. He wasn't even artistic. But given there was nothing else to do anymore, he decided he'd go along. Now, the first class, he didn't actually do any art. But somehow, just being around the colours, the paints, the calming atmosphere, all had an effect. And as he was leaving, he felt his breathing was slower and he felt calmer. In the second class, he started doing some doodling. In the third class, he picked up a paintbrush. Russell is still not sure how things escalated quite so rapidly after this, but within a few weeks, he had painted pictures of everybody in his arts class. He approached the Museum of Gloucester and asked them to do an exhibition of his paintings, and they agreed, and they let him host it in the cafe. At the launch, he received his first commission. When Russell went back to his GP, he was actually able to report that his mood and his pain and sleep were all better. His doctor actually found that his blood pressure was lower as well, and said they could start to reduce his medications. In the decades since, Russell Haynes has exhibited his artwork from Gloucester Cathedral to the Tower of London. He now runs his own art classes in the community, and his GP has been referring other patients to him. He doesn't actually take any medications anymore. He's not even been to see his GP in over a year. I first met Russell as we were both waiting behind the scenes to go onto BBC Breakfast news programme to talk about plans to roll arts on prescription out across the NHS. I said to Russell, "Can you actually quantify how big an impact do these classes have on you?" He didn't miss a beat. They saved my life. Do you ever hum in the shower? Doodle in your notebook? Dance, however awkwardly, at a party? Take photos on your phone? Even if you don't think of yourself as artistic or creative, that's actually not true. We are all producers of the arts. We are a planet of 8 billion artists. And ever since our ancestors started painting caves, carving sculptures, singing and dancing, art has been inherently intertwined with health and healing. In fact, if you look back across every single major medical tradition, you find the arts in the early writings of those traditions. What has developed very much over the last few decades, accelerating rapidly, is the scientific evidence base discovering and quantifying these health benefits. And I want to take you on a little whistle-stop tour of the evidence. So starting in the mind, did you know that if you go to museums, galleries, live music, the cinema, the theatre, you actually have half the odds of developing depression over the next 10 years? If you already have depression, if you add arts therapies in alongside existing treatments like psychological therapies or medication, you can actually experience nearly twice the improvements in symptoms. Why, you might ask? Because when we engage in the arts, we give our brains what they want to be happy. We activate reward and pleasure networks that are the same networks activated by food, sex, and drugs. And we lead to release of hormones like dopamine, the happy hormone. But we also give our brains what they need. Arts engagement helps us to fulfill core psychological needs, such as having a sense of mastery or autonomy in our lives. And it also helps to regulate our emotions so that we're better able to deal with life stresses and buffer them effectively. If we delve deeper into the brain, engaging in the arts as children is actually something that we are born innately artistic and able to do. And as we grow, arts engagement helps to develop the core architecture of the brain, helping to nurture core cognitive skills like language development, and actually fundamentally altering the size and function of different brain regions. As we get older, if we continue to engage in the arts, it actually helps to build the resilience of our brains against the ravages of diseases like dementia, helping us to preserve our cognition for longer and even unlock forgotten memories. The arts also activate really diverse regions of the brain, such as those involved in movement. So if we listen to music, we're actually able to run faster, even hold weights in the gym for longer. And if we participate in the arts, for people who've had brain injuries, this can actually help the brain to develop new neural pathways around injuries. If we zoom out to look at the body, there's actually no physiological system that the arts don't affect. When we sing, when we breathe deeply, that actually improves the strength of our respiratory muscles. When we dance, it helps to reduce our blood pressure and glucose levels. Arts engagement even activates immune function and affects the biological expression of our genes, helping us to stay biologically younger, physically fit and functioning, free from disease for longer, extending what we call our health span. The arts also play a fundamental role in hospitals. In neonatal intensive care units, music can help premature babies to maintain their weight, feed better, and leave hospital sooner. And in surgical settings, recorded music can actually lead to reductions in the need for sedatives, opioids, and anti-anxiety medication. Health also isn't just something that happens to us. Our behaviours matter too. If young people, like children and adolescents, have access to the arts and extracurricular activities in schools, they're actually less likely to become lonely or to develop behavioural problems, less likely to commit crimes or take marijuana or engage with tobacco. Arts help us to develop core life skills from self-esteem to self-control, empathy, and motivation. The arts also give us a way to be socially connected and be less sedentary, all of which adds up to affect our future health. I want to be clear, the arts are not a panacea. And in fact, there are plenty of examples of the arts doing harm, from being used as active tools within torture to being a way to wield power within society. But these are the exceptions. It's actually no exaggeration to say that the arts could save your life, from helping to prevent suicides to being used as a way of communicating critical health messages during health emergencies like epidemics, to actually being able to increase our life expectancy. The arts can be the difference between life and death. This isn't sensationalism, it's science. Can you imagine if a drug had this same catalogue of benefits? We'd be taking it every day, fighting to get our hands on it, paying premium prices, telling everybody about it. We'd be investing billions in research and development. It would be revered as our elixir. But unfortunately, the reality is quite different. We as societies are actually becoming increasingly disengaged from the arts. If you looked back just a few hundred years ago, everyone sang, danced, told stories. But we have taken this ubiquitous human behavior and commodified it, turned it into a luxury. Folk arts practices are disappearing, and all around the world, the rituals that used to bring us together to engage in the arts together are actually fading from memory. When we do engage, it's increasingly passive, playlists that we plug into and then zone out from. 80 years ago, the United Nations declared access to the arts a human right. But in most countries around the world, arts engagement is still heavily imbalanced, with the wealthiest and healthiest participating the most. And every time we face periods of austerity, funding for the arts is the first thing to be cut. In the UK, in the last 10 years, local arts funding has halved. Over 270 libraries have closed. And there's been a 37% cut in the number of children and adolescents taking arts GCSEs. We haven't considered the health ramifications of these decisions. For the last couple of years, I've been working with the UK government on economic modelling. We've actually identified that current participation rates for the arts amongst working-age adults in the UK alone, The general health benefits of these are worth £18.6 billion to society every year. So every pound that we cut in funding to the arts has consequences for health and for healthcare systems. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourselves. How many minutes yesterday did you spend actively engaging in the arts? When I say actively, I mean that it was the primary thing that you were doing. So discount things like putting the radio on, but then actually thinking about or doing something else rather than just exclusively listening to it. When we asked a representative sample of US adults this question, 95% of them said 0. So technically, if you said any number that's higher than that, you could be congratulating yourselves. But I want you to think, that number that you said, is that really sufficient? Do you think that you're really valuing that myriad of health benefits that I've just outlined? If we compare arts engagement to other better-known health behaviours, in high-income countries, we find that 50% of people say that they ate their vegetables yesterday, and 40% say that they get their 150 minutes of physical activity every week. I really don't believe that doing arts is any less enjoyable than eating broad beans or sweating in the gym. Rather, I think that most people are really unaware about just how valuable arts engagement is to their health. The evidence base has remained this bizarrely well-kept secret. And that is why I've written my new book, Arts Cure, because it doesn't really seem right or even ethical for this evidence base to stay hidden. Because if we flip around everything that I've been talking about, we shouldn't necessarily be arguing that we all need more arts in our lives, but instead worrying about the fact that we don't have enough arts engagement. Taken this way, art deprivation is associated with an increased risk of depression, dementia, chronic pain, harmful behaviours, physical decline, even premature mortality. And by not ensuring equal access to the arts, by allowing them to be unevenly distributed within and between societies, we're actually exacerbating health inequalities. So, in Arts Cure, I take you on a journey through the astonishing scientific evidence for how the arts can improve your health, stave off illness and disease, and help you to lead a longer and fuller life. When I say the arts, we really do take in all of the arts, from classical music to hip-hop, ballet to salsa, galleries to graffiti. My goal is to fundamentally change the way that you value and engage with the arts in your daily life. So in each chapter, I explore a different aspect of health: well-being, mental health, brain health, movement, stress and pain, healthy behaviours, and longevity. And I take you through the science of the benefits, whether you're healthy or living with an illness. At the end of each chapter, I also share evidence-based recommendations for how you can use the science to write your own arts prescription, like the one that Russell received from his GP, and increase your own daily dose of arts in your lives. Every health behaviour we're now familiar with has what I call a seatbelt moment. So a moment when, after decades of wearying lobbying from scientists, people finally woke up to just how important that behaviour is to their health and suddenly realised why it was so important to do that behaviour. Diet started getting its due attention in the 1970s, physical activity in the 1980s, seatbelts in cars in the 1990s, smoking bans just after the millennium. I actually believe that seatbelt moment for the arts is now. So what for me started off as writing a book on this science has actually become a mission. The arts are not a luxury, they're an essential. As I argue in Arts Cure, the arts, alongside diet, physical activity, sleep, and nature, are the forgotten fifth pillar of health. Thank you.